Wealth, fame, power. Eiichiro Oda, the author of One Piece, attained this and everything else the world had to offer, and his words drove countless souls to their Netflix accounts. I want to call attention to how perfect the Straw Hat cast are. It's like you're watching the Straw Hats in real life, which I'd love for you to savor. These words lured fans to Hollywood's latest attempt to adapt a popular anime in pursuit of finally making one that's actually watchable. This is known as Netflix's One Piece. We are truly living in some weird times, aren't we? I mean, never did I think I'd see the day where we get an actually good live-action adaptation of a popular anime or manga. How could I? With the very, very long line of disappointments, even someone who's as optimistic as me, for a while there, I started to believe that making a good live-action adaptation of an anime simply couldn't be done. Whether it be because Eastern and Western culture are too fundamentally different, or that manga rarely contains material that would translate well into a medium that isn't animation, I was almost convinced that it just wasn't possible. That is, until it was announced that Netflix would be making a live-action adaptation of One Piece, the best-selling manga of all time, bar none, and one of the most popular anime in the history of animation. I've been a huge fan of One Piece for years, so when I heard that they were making a live-action adaptation, my reaction was, well... Honestly, I took it a lot better than I thought I would. Needless to say, I went into the show with less than high expectations, because if there is any anime that you could argue shouldn't be adapted to live action, it's One Piece. Unlike some other anime that are mostly grounded in reality and don't call for fast-paced and exaggerated animation, One Piece from the get-go has always been inherently cartoony. So much so that it changed its own animation style not once, not twice, but 3 separate times in its 26-year run just to keep up with itself. But because I'm a sucker for One Piece, I decided I'd give the show a fair chance. Not expecting it to be anything revolutionary, but also hoping that, at the very least, it's not an assault on the senses. So I sat down and binged the first season, and whilst I definitely had some minor issues with the show, particularly the costumes, to say that Netflix's One Piece surprised me would be a gross understatement. I very much enjoyed the first season of the show. And not in a, oh well, at least it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen kind of way. I mean that Netflix's One Piece is probably the single greatest live-action adaptation of an anime ever put to screen. Not that that's saying a whole lot, but I digress. Thankfully, I wasn't the only one who thought this either. Netflix's One Piece was a success all across the board, receiving praise not just from fans of the anime and manga, but from the creator of One Piece itself, Eiichiro Oda. This success prompted Netflix to greenlight another season of the show, and wouldn't you know it, the second season upped the ante and got an even better reception than the first one. So much so that a third season, adapting the Alabasta arc, is currently underway. This is awesome, because it not only ensures that us One Piece fans are going to be eating good for the foreseeable future, but it has broken the cycle of live-action adaptations of anime being absolute eyesores that give you secondhand embarrassment just by watching it. But in the midst of this historic moment for anime, I had all but one burning question in the back of my mind. How is this possible? How could one of the most goofy, most over-the-top, most conceptually insane stories of the past century be faithfully adapted into a live-action series? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out today. Starting off with what the show gets right as an adaptation, and that is by not being one-to-one with its source material. The most common critique of live-action adaptations for manga and anime, for any book adapted to media really, is that they fail to capture what made the book so great in the first place. But it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if the adaptation tries to be a carbon copy of its source material, it fails to justify its own existence, and it loses all imagination. Even though mangas have pictures, we still have to use some of our imagination to figure out what the movements and sound effects would be like if they were in real life. Which means if the adaptation is the exact same thing as the manga, then it unintentionally invalidates the reader's imagination. But what Netflix's One Piece does so well is that it learns from the shortcomings of its source material, but also expands on what people love about it. It really understands One Piece and is able to adapt it into live action without seeming like a cheap cardboard cutout. Even when the show has some less than stellar costumes in its first season, it still feels like One Piece. Mainly because in its first 100 episodes, One Piece's animation style, while not the worst thing ever made, it did leave a lot to be desired. But that's what kind of gives the idea that the two shows, despite being released so far apart from one another, have a very similar history. And just like in the anime, Netflix's One Piece consistently improves on whatever little shortcomings it may have over time. Season 1 was great, but Season 2 was even better, because it shows that they definitely had an increase in their budget, given that they have better effects, costume translations, and amazing set design. I'm not even kidding. This show is almost worth it just for the set design and coloring alone, so major props to the set designers and construction crews that worked on these locations. Really, the designs of the One Piece world are just as important as anything else, especially with the characters. I definitely did chuckle a bit seeing some of the Fishman designs, as well as the Black Hat Pirates. They kinda showed me where the show's budget didn't go to. But that wasn't my reaction to all the character designs. I think that out of all the characters, the one who resembles their character the closest is probably Mihawk, played by Stephen John Ward. Everything he does, the way he looks, the way he moves, the way he acts, I totally buy that this is Mihawk. Thankfully, my praise for the characters' designs doesn't end there, as they are vastly improved upon in Season 2, with characters like Kureha, played by Katie Sagal. It's actually a little freaky how similar she looks and acts like her anime counterpart. Then there's Chopper, played amazingly by Michaela Hoover. And I have to say, one of the things that really sticks out to me about Chopper is just how great he looks both in his base form and his more buff, heavy point form. Oddly enough, when it was announced that Chopper was going to appear in the second season, I'd completely forgotten about the possibility of seeing his other forms in live action. So when it happened for the first time, I was completely caught off guard. I have to say, I was really surprised by how well they did it. I think it really helps that the design is almost entirely practical, and it allows the production to save some money on Chopper CGI. Now that's what I call filmmaker brain. More importantly though, it's faithful to what Chopper is supposed to look like, and the fact that it's live action doesn't really hurt it for me. That's actually the case with almost every named character in this show. Instead of trying to water down the goofiness of One Piece's art style, this show leans into it. It wholeheartedly embraces One Piece's roots, and despite it being in live action and not animation, it's surprisingly never distracting for me. Any other adaptation would have simply crumbled under designs like these because they're just so wacky and larger than life. But I found myself not feeling distracted at all because, no matter how silly it may be, the structure of this series leads me to believe that the characters are supposed to look this way. This is especially important when the show needs the audience to be emotionally invested to have more of an effect during those hard-hitting emotional scenes that really tug on your heartstrings. I think the makeup team did really well with a lot of the designs this season, and I'm super excited to see what they're going to do for us in Season 3. Alabasta is an important ARC production team, so please keep doing what you're doing and give us One Piece fans another technical marvel when the time comes. Now with that being said, the technical aspects of the show getting better and better means absolutely nothing if the story isn't there, which is one of the main things that fans were worried about going into this series. We've all heard the jokes about how One Piece has 1 trillion episodes and it's super long and yada yada yada. However, that same hesitation actually has a bit of ground to stand on with this show. Since the original story is so long, what does that mean for the future of this series? More specifically, what will this new story be like? What will be added to it? What will be taken out? It's a scary thing to think about if you're a big fan of the series because you want to see the show done right and include every little thing that makes One Piece so great. And for the most part, I'd say the show does just that. This is because Netflix's One Piece has a secret weapon hidden up its sleeve: hindsight. One of the more justifiable as well as constant complaints about the One Piece anime that I strongly agree with is its pacing issues. Now keep in mind, this is coming from someone who started their One Piece journey with the anime and then went over to read the manga. I do still watch the anime, and as much as I do love it, I just can't deny that it's really hard to not get distracted by the anime's repetitive use of the same sound effects, the same 4 or 5 music tracks, and it's at times painfully slow pace. Granted, that's an issue that a lot of animes face because they have to give the authors time to release new canon material so that it could then be adapted to the anime, but it's still frustrating. Especially when the arc is building to a big climactic fight or moment that's taking forever to arrive. Thankfully, Netflix's One Piece is able to adapt the key moments that stand out without dragging its feet, and surprisingly, without feeling rushed, which was something I was initially worried about. The East Blue Saga by itself is just over 50 episodes long in the anime, and over 100 chapters in the manga, but excluding some of the stuff that bleeds into Season 2 of the Netflix version, the East Blue Saga is only 8 episodes long. This is because the writers of the show had the benefit of hindsight on their side. They clearly looked into where the source material shined, and also where it may have faltered. There's also the fact that, in a surprising change of pace for live-action adaptations of anime, the writers actually listened to the author. Seriously, it's almost tradition at this point for the people working on a live-action adaptation of a popular anime or manga to completely ignore the notes and advice that the mangaka gives them, assuming they ask them at all. I was so relieved to hear the reports that, whilst working on the scripts, Oda would frequently challenge the showrunners' ideas and push them to do better, to ask themselves if what they're doing is truly in line with the heart of One Piece, an effort that definitely paid off in the end. Eiichiro Oda's influence is definitely noticeable in the final cut of the show, because even though the writers definitely had to do a lot of condensing, it still felt organic and respectful of the original story. There were obviously a lot of minor things cut, but for some reason, it just didn't feel like we missed anything. It hit the beats it needed to tell the story the right way, and it took out what wasn't really needed. No easy feat, but they somehow got it done, so props to the writers and directors of the show. But it doesn't matter how good the writing is. If the actors can't sell the performance, then you're not going to get good results. What constitutes a good performance for a live-action adaptation of something like One Piece, though? Well, the first thing you have to consider is that if the actors were to just do an impression of their anime counterparts, it wouldn't translate very well because, since it's animation, the characters are allowed to be more, well, animated. Which they definitely are. This was one of my main concerns going into the show. The behaviors and mannerisms of the characters in the world of One Piece are, more often than not, anything but subtle. Which is why I was so relieved that, for the live-action version, the actors modified the personality traits of the characters they're playing, as opposed to just trying to copy what the anime does. This works in the show's favor because it allows their performances to be faithful to who their characters really are, whilst also being in line with the structure of this version of the series. It understands that just because it gives you something that you're familiar with, doesn't mean it's giving you something that works, at least in this context. The truth is, if they were the exact same characters as they are in the anime, then the character translations would have gotten lost in, well, translation. Luffy and Usopp probably would have been seen as annoying, Zoro would have been perceived as one-dimensional, Sanji would have been labeled as a creep, no doubt in my mind about that, Chopper would have been deemed as whiny, and Nami probably would have been called a girl boss or a Mary Sue by every annoying film bro on the internet. But instead, we get very mature and informed performances by the actors. Luffy is really charming, Usopp's hilarious, Zoro's a badass, Sanji is suave, Chopper is adorable, and Nami is ever so endearing. Emily Rudd's portrayal of Nami is absolutely stellar. I think she does a great job of bringing the character to life and reminding us why Nami is everyone's favorite cat burglar. Chopper doesn't show up until a little bit later in the season, probably because of the money it takes to bring him to life, but when he is around, Michaela Hoover brings out all the depth and cuteness that comes with the character. And yes, I know she's not a Straw Hat yet, but it would be an absolute crime if I didn't mention Lyra Obova's portrayal of Miss All Sunday, better known as Nico Robin. She adds such a rich layer of mystery to the character, and I cannot wait to see what she does in Season 3. There's also Taz Skylar, who was given an especially difficult task with bringing a character like Sanji to life. There's so many ways that the portrayal of this specific character could have gone horribly wrong, but he somehow found a way to balance Sanji's girl-crazy persona and portray the character the way he needed to be portrayed. Same thing with Makenyu's portrayal of Zoro. I don't know if I said that name correctly, but let's pretend like I did. He has such a commanding presence in every scene that he's in, and his fight scenes are always the highlights of the episodes. Jacob Gibson is hysterical as Usopp. He really emulates the character's comedic cowardice, but also his resolve when it comes to being a team player. And last but not least, I have to give a huge King Kong gun-sized shoutout to Iñaki Godoy's portrayal of Luffy. Of all the characters in this series, this was by far the biggest shoes to fill, and Iñaki does not disappoint. He does so well at adapting Luffy's tenacity and spirit in a way that feels honest. It also really helps that Oda personally handpicked not just Iñaki to play Luffy, but all the main Straw Hats. I'd say he definitely made the right decisions, because it's pretty obvious that they all did their homework for these roles and do great with direction. So great job to the live-action Straw Hats. You guys absolutely killed it in these roles. And it's not just the main actors who do a great job bringing these characters to life. The supporting characters and even some of the background actors really make me feel like I'm watching One Piece get brought to life. Which is no easy feat considering all the crazy things that make One Piece what it is. All the crazy hairstyles, the insane superpowers, the anthropomorphic characters, and absolutely bonkers fight scenes that are to be expected from a shonen anime. Things that shouldn't be able to work in live action, but they just do. Overall, I think that the cast and crew of the show were able to get it right because they not only understand the material that they're working with, but love it as well. This show isn't just a love letter to fans, it's a love letter to One Piece itself. When you really think about it, how many other anime can you say are able to not only simply exist, but also thrive in 3 different mediums: manga, anime, and live action? It's a testament to how great this story is, a testament to how One Piece has transcended its roots and is more accessible than ever. I want to sincerely thank everyone who worked on this show. I am truly excited to see what you guys have in store for us One Piece fans, with all the different locations and characters and fight scenes. It kills me that we have to wait so long in between seasons, but if we have to wait for it to be its regular awesome self, then I guess we're gonna have to wait as long as we need to. So, in case the people at Netflix had any doubts about whether or not us One Piece fans are on board with this show, I can very confidently say, we are. But anyways guys, thank you all so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell, so you're notified every time I upload a new video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment letting me know what you want to see next. But other than that guys, thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.